Hello everyone, this is Dr. Newmark. Sorry for the glitchy beginning of this video, but this is going to be sort of a different style of video than most of the ones that will come after this. This one's going to be a bit choppy because I'm going to try to toggle between the PowerPoint at the beginning of the presentation, and then I'm going to screen share the course calendar, the syllabus, and the Purdue OWL. So I'm going to have to go back and forth, so let's see how it goes. Okay, so in this video, probably at the end of it actually, and not in this order shown on the screen, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our course goals and assignments. I'm going to review the syllabus and the course calendar, and we're going to look at the Purdue OWL a little bit in this video. And then we're going to talk about some present-day workplace communication examples of persuasive visual communication and a historical, culturally specific example. And we're going to discuss the connections between these. So I originally designed these slides, although I've adapted them a little bit to bring in some more local examples, but I originally created them when I was in Finland last year. I actually taught this class just between January and May, so just a few months ago this year. And so I've tried to keep some of the content from that Finnish course just to give this course a little bit more of an international flavor, because I do think that's very beneficial, so that we look at localized or culturally specific tactics for using historically significant visual tropes to make meaning in particular contexts. So as you know, probably from looking at the syllabus and the course calendar yourself, we have a very particular course goal, and it is this. We will engage with the theories and practices of the production and consumption of visual images and information. We will consider the historical aspects of the generation and use of images as they have functioned as persuasive rhetorical mediums in political, social, workplace, and personal domains for local, national, and global audiences. I already mentioned that I'm really interested in the national and the global aspects of this, and we will see that played out this semester. The examples in this very video will demonstrate that. So we're going to look at the course calendar and the syllabus in just a minute, although you've probably already looked at those on your own. And the Purdue OWL, many of you are probably already familiar with this. It's the Purdue University Online Writing Lab. If you teach core writing at our university, 1110 or 1120, or even English 2210, technical writing, you may use the Purdue OWL with your students. It's an excellent and robust resource. I'm actually using it with you all, graduate students, so we're going to look at it here in a minute. Okay, but I want to do the last part of the agenda for this presentation first, which is talking about cultural visual histories as they connect to workplace visual communication. So what is the relationship? So classical visual vocabularies help shape our culture. Values, intellectual priorities, national identity, and more all come into play in the way that we use images, things that are very abstract, like symbols, and things that are very concrete, that are icons that represent something significant to our country, like the red, white, and blue flag icon or the emoji. It's been used both to enforce and to destabilize certain messages. Sometimes it's used earnestly, sometimes it's used ironically. So there are a lot of ways that we use visual tactics almost as a shorthand for much more substantive meaning making. So we're going to talk about why that happens. This class has a lot of pretty dense historical and theoretical content in the first third of the class, and some of it comes from classical oil paintings. Some of it comes from, continental philosophy from the early 20th century. So we come from a pretty broad place, and then we hone down into the specific applications for technical and professional communication, which is my area of specialty. So I'm really interested in workplace communication as somebody who teaches technical and professional communication. So some workplace communication is intended for the people in that workplace, and some is created in a workplace, but the audience may be lay people outside of that organization. So many of these communications inherit visual communication values and priorities. I'm going to look at these with you in just a minute. So there are many parallels between how people communicate in the workplace and the often like the document design tactics, which itself is a visual strategy, and the way that public communication operates in terms of document design strategy or website interface tactics. So workplace communications also demonstrate an inheritance from visual communication genealogies within a particular culture. I mean, that can be a national culture, or it can be conceived of more broadly, like if we think of, Euro-American or Judeo-Christian visual rhetorical histories, those obviously aren't delimited by national boundaries. They transgress those boundaries, and there's a certain meaning that can be understood by people who share those kinds of worldviews or values. So there are priorities that are associated with these kinds of visual vocabularies that can be highly localized, like the Zia symbol comes from the Zia tribal community, the Zia Pueblo here in New Mexico, and it has a specific meaning in that community, but then it's been co-opted, or in fact, the usage in certain contexts has been authorized by Zia Pueblo to mean something else for a broader non-Indigenous community, and it's been used to convey New Mexico writ large because it is on our state flag. So just as a sidebar there, many usages of the Zia symbol are not authorized by Zia Pueblo, but some of the more official ones are. They've been given their sanction by the tribal community at Zia Pueblo. So that's just an example of how we have very specific local discourse community oriented knowledge sets related to certain visual vocabularies. And then there are others that are much broader, much more pervasive, and much better understood by a larger community. So I'm using this example to start us off with. So this is Kenneth Adams's mural, The Three Peoples. I would love for us to have a conversation if we were all together in person about these paintings. I'm wondering if you're familiar with these. If you're not, please take a little note and look up the controversy surrounding these paintings. These are in our own Zimmerman Library at the University of New Mexico, and they were painted in the first third of the 20th century as part of a Works Progress Administration public art project. And they are intended to convey the history of New Mexico and are somewhat mythologized tricultural history: Hispanic people, Indigenous people, and Euro-American people. And you can see how all of these people are depicted in these murals. Now, these murals have been found to be deeply disturbing and controversial to many people in our university community. And if you read more about these, you'll learn that they are now covered. There are electric screens that go up and down over these murals, so they're hidden from view unless students in a art history class or some other tour of the historic wing of Zimmerman Library get permission to view them. So if we look at them really carefully, we can see how this artist, Kenneth Adams, deployed certain visual vocabularies that were meant to evoke a much more significant historical lesson about the state of New Mexico. And these hung, well, they still hang, they're still painted on a wall in a really important, iconic building on our university campus. So they fit together into a larger story. But as you can see, the Euro-American figure in the lower right is in the center, and he is being supported by people representing Indigenous New Mexicans and Hispanic New Mexicans. But it is the Anglo person, the European American person, who's been centered, literally quite centered in this panel. And in the lower left, you see that it is the Euro-American person who is engaged in scientific activity, where the Hispanic or the Indigenous people are engaged in other kinds of activities. So as you can perhaps understand, this mural generated quite a lot of controversy in the last decade. And so I'm using it just to show you in a pretty powerful and evocative way how visual vocabularies, and in fact visual persuasive meaning making, has been used to represent larger institutions, in this case our university and our whole state and education in our state, and how it's been found to in fact discriminate against or ostracize or marginalize people who have been represented in problematic ways in a painting such as this. Please do read all about this controversy, but you can see that this also is characterized by a certain aesthetic style that inherits from European oil painting, which we're going to read in our first book, John Berger's Ways of Seeing. And again, because this comes from almost 100 years ago, you can see how the aesthetic choices that were made very much resonate with a certain artistic or painterly style from that era, but it still involves specific symbols and icons that resonate with our state. So I would love to talk to you more about this, but I'm going to move on to another example. Okay, now this is a Finnish example, and this is a very famous painting. The last one I showed you is like an iconic University of New Mexico set of paintings, but in fact, many people don't know about them. They were in a part of the library and were not covered for many, many decades, but now they are. So even if you were strolling through Zimmerman, you wouldn't know them. But this painting that I'm showing on the screen, every Finnish person knows. 100% of my students in Finland knew of this painting. It's a very famous rendering of a scene from their national epic, the Kalevala. And it is one of the main characters of this epic being brought back to life by his mother. So it's a really famous painting by the most famous Finnish painter, Akseli Gallen-Kallela. Now, my students taught me a lot about this painting, how its visual vocabularies, the way that the space is organized in this painting, have conjured over the decades since its painting, which again was almost in the same time period as the last paintings I showed you, but halfway around the world. But in fact, this artist, Akseli Gallen-Kallela, visited the Taos artists colony in the 1920s, so the exact same era that that last painting was painted. Anyway, the ideas and the images that are used to create additional layers of meaning for the Finnish people in this painting have been replayed and redeployed, and new versions have been created, in fact memified, that in such a way that meaning is conveyed to people with a certain cultural history who are able to deconstruct the meaning in this painting in a way that you and I probably can't, unless somebody in this class happens to have Finnish ancestry and knows about this. But all of that is vacated for us because we aren't privy to what this means, who this is, what this depicts, what the particular relationship historically between Finnish mothers and Finnish sons is. That's all sort of intertwined or interlaced or deeply embedded in this painting. So this one has certain meaning in our culture, our local New Mexican culture, even though it's highly problematic. This one has a certain particular meaning for Finnish people. Okay, now we're going to jump into something that seems really, really different. These are technical documents or professional communication artifacts. These are really recent. This is from the organization New Mexico Natives Vote. And you can see the way that certain symbols are used to convey in-grouping or a particular community that this is designed for. This is for Native American voters in our state, trying to teach them about the voting process, where to go, how to do it, and galvanize interest in actually voting from 2024. So you see some very typical techniques to design documents here, and we're going to talk about these. From the use of heading hierarchies, we see different sizes of font intended to convey different levels of the importance of information. And we think about something that's large and capturing our visual attention being more significant. And we see how that is used in these paintings as well. Large things draw our attention. Things that are in the center of an image draw our attention. This image uses the rule of thirds, which we're going to learn about. And these images at the bottom, such as the one in the lower right, also uses in a very powerful and problematic way this rule of thirds, the splitting of an image or a space up into 3 parts in order to draw attention to certain parts. So you see how our eye is tracking across this page. In technical communication, usability testers often use eye tracking software to see how our eyes move across a page on a website in order to see whether users are looking at what we want them to look at. Now, the purpose of this document is to allow a reader to pace through it in a really specific way so they get the information they need. And we'll talk about documents like this many times over the course of the semester. Now, this image, these are screenshots from the Kone company, which is a Finnish elevator and escalator multinational heavy machinery company. If you start paying attention to elevators and escalators that you ride on, some of them that you ride on will be made by Kone. Now, Kone, as I said, is an international company, but they have a deeply Finnish past. And so I really analyzed these screenshots with my students in Finland to try to examine whether certain elements or important facets of Finnish culture were in fact communicated in the website content created by this company, which was intended for international consumption. So one of the things that we really focused in on was the design of their company's logo, the block letters used in the name Kone. You can see it in the upper right of this screen, these 4 blocks with K-O-N-E in them. That itself, for a company that sells elevators and escalators that people would necessarily always want to be sturdy and sound and secure, it leaves no ambiguity about the strength and the rigidity or the formal nature of what they are trying to represent themselves as being. So we also have a little diagram down here of a product, of a Kone product, and you see the use of color, how they are trying to insist upon the environmental friendliness or efficiency of their products. They code that with green in this diagram. And then we also have information about how their products support a smooth and quiet ride for users. So they use numerical coding, they use a transparent view diagram here, but they're also showing sort of a diverse user base as represented by this business person riding in this elevator here with his tote bag here on the side, and he's riding up in an elevator, but they're also fusing many visual elements here to assemble a certain visual messaging about their company. So again, this is something that's really interesting to deconstruct in the way that it uses persuasive visual techniques to tell a story about this company and its values. Okay, so that's the end of this slide presentation. I'm going to awkwardly here toggle over to another screen. So bear with me as I do that. Okay, so now on the screen, you are going to see our course calendar. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this today. When you look at our course calendar, you're going to see the weeks broken down one by one. So we have the first week, this is where we are right now. And then in the second week, you'll start to see actual more rigorous readings assigned to you. These are listed in the course calendar, but then they're also listed in each module of our course. And then as we scroll down, you'll start to see requirements for discussion board postings, such as the team presentations, which we'll start talking about more next week. But you can work with a partner or you can work individually on the presentation that you have to do in this class. So read this course calendar really carefully, and it's your key, it's your guide to everything that happens in this class. Now, in terms of the syllabus, you hopefully have read it. You've read about the goals in the course. And then if you look at the major assignments, you will learn a lot about what you have to do this semester. There's this scrapbook, this portfolio, and I will share examples with you of ones that students have done in the past. But basically, for every week in which you have readings, you have to have an online, you could also do it in Word or PDF, but many people use like an online blogging platform to share an image or a video and then provide an analysis of what that means vis-a-vis the readings that we've done that week in class. It's basically quite straightforward. The next thing is the presentation. I just alluded to that. So if you read this paragraph in the syllabus, you'll learn a lot about this presentation, and it's not too long, 20 to 30 minutes, but you do need to record it, and you do need to make sure that you can upload it somewhere or share it with your classmates in the discussion board so other folks in the class can view it and they can answer questions that you pose to them about your presentation. So we have a wide variety of readings in this class. Some of them are very technical and dense, and some of them are, somewhat more easy to access in terms of extract information from them. So I will circulate a Google Doc that will have a sign up for the different readings in the class. So if after perusing the course calendar, you're like, oh, that looks really interesting, I want to be sure to sign up for that, go ahead and grab that spot. Okay, and then there's a final project in the class. So actually, there's not a whole lot of like large assignments. There's your scrapbook, your presentation, and then your final project. And then you have discussion board posts, which are your responses to your classmates' presentations. So they share their video presentation, and then you engage with each one that is shared in the class. There will also be a peer review. There's one peer review in this class. So there's the total breakdown of points in the class. This is the points value, and then everything else in the syllabus is just all of the information that we are obligated to share with you, but please do read it. It is very important. The last thing I want to show you in this already very long video is the Purdue OWL. If you came into this class and you're like, I have no idea what visual rhetoric is, what does that even mean? Please click through many of the options that you have here on this website. I mean, they have a lot of information. You can pull down these menus, you can read, you can just sort of poke around and learn quite a lot. So please do that if you're really starting from square one and you don't know what visual rhetoric is, even though if you've watched this long video, you've already had sort of an opening overview lecture on how I configure visual rhetoric, both in the space of sort of cultural history, as well as in particular workplace and business contexts that might seem to be more fitting with a course in technical and professional communication. But we bridge both this humanities style of looking at persuasive visual communication to a more technical, some would say positivist, but I really don't ever use that term because I think technical communication is a humanism. But we connect these things together in this class, and I'm really excited to do that with you. And most weeks' videos won't be this long, but we had to do a lot in this one. So on that note, I'm going to sign off, and I will see you again in next week's video.